We know that evolution can bring about some pretty different creatures, but can we really understand it? How they come about?
Dun, 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 dun. Dun, 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 dun. Dun, 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 dun. Dun, 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 dun. Dun, 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 dun.
Welcome, students and all you curious folks out there. My name is Tarek, and today we're going to talk about phylogeny. As we saw earlier in our evolution classes, we know that animals change in random ways. So, even if an organism has the same ancestors and lives in an environment with the same characteristics as others, the result can still be completely different species. Because of this, we often find in nature animals that aren't closely related, developing similar structures, like the example we have here. On the screen, we see a mammal, a fish, and a reptile, all with similar shaped structures, but their evolutionary trees are very different. This is what we call convergent evolution, when all of them end up with the same shape because it's the best fit, regardless of their evolutionary history. Or we can have the opposite, animals with common ancestors that end up with very different structures, like bats, whales, and humans, whose arms are completely different in terms of function. But all of them came from the same predecessor, which is called divergent evolution, because their paths diverge. It's when the function of a structure that came from the same ancestor changes over time. In other words, identifying these patterns in nature without really knowing what came from where or from whom seems pretty tough, thanks to the randomness of mutations. Because of that, there's a whole science dedicated just to this kind of mapping, and we call it phylogeny. But before we talk about that, we need to discuss two important fields for understanding phylogeny: taxonomy and molecular genetics. Taxonomy is the science that studies what organisms are like physically, what their physical and physiological characteristics are. So a big part of taxonomy is already about looking for patterns among living organisms, classifying which ones are more similar to each other. We saw how this science came about in the lesson on Linnaeus' classifications. Go check it out later. But we should point out that it goes way beyond the classification discussed in the video. It covers various ways of classifying, and it's the foundation for all the studies on phylogeny that we'll explain later on. Molecular genetics, on the other hand, is the study that tries to find the function of each gene within an organism. In this way, just like taxonomy, it's possible to make comparisons and groupings among organisms that have similar genes, which we call molecular systematics. This type of study has always been very expensive and difficult to carry out. But in modern times, the cost has dropped a lot, and it's become much more accessible for researchers to analyze various animals using this tool. So it's not only possible to group animals by their external characteristics, but also by their own genes, which often aren't visible just by looking at the animal. Well, now that we know how scientists organize animals into different groups, how about it? Let's try to understand a bit about how these groups are related to each other. We know that the living organisms today are the ones best adapted to the environment they live in, regardless of which organism we're talking about. If it's alive, it's because it managed to eliminate the competition that existed for that place where it lives, or for the resources it uses. But we also know that the world hasn't always been this way, and that we'll have completely different new species emerging in the future. So we can't just group together the organisms that are alive today. We need to understand where they came from and what the relationships are in geological time. And for that, we need to look at fossils. Fossils give us clues not only about what living organisms looked like in our planet's past, but also about when those organisms lived. That way, we can get an idea of how organisms evolved and who is descended from whom. Don't believe it? Check out these examples I'm going to show on the screen. In all three examples shown, the animals that gave rise to current species, including humans, no longer exist. They're remnants of what once was. Today's animals are what they are because of a clear record showing how they came to be, through mutations, what changed first, and how those changes are connected. The job of phylogeny is to understand these patterns and create diagrams that represent how they happen, as shown on the screen for you. Of course, we should point out that this organization, even though it's always strongly based on physical, physiological, and genetic records, is always hypothetical. They're hypotheses because we start from the idea that we don't know everything yet, and eventually new information might come up that changes the classification. But in general, for that friend of yours who says the theory of evolution is just a theory, you really shouldn't take them too seriously. Show him this video so your buddy can understand that it's not just a theory, there's actually a very strong foundation behind it that should be taken into account. I hope you enjoyed the video. Don't forget to like and share, and remember that we have a new video every week, so subscribe to the channel and turn on the notification bell to always get the latest updates. Thank you so much.